behalf of L.B. Shriver and all his friends and family, we'd like to welcome you today to this remembrance of his life and his passing. And thank you to Ed and Jerry Noyes for hosting this event in this aptly named structure, Phoenix Rising. I think that's... okay. All right. Did you hear any of that? On behalf of L.B. Shriver, we welcome you to this memorial service in remembrance of his life and his passing. And wish to thank Ed and Jerry Noyes for hosting this event in this hall, Phoenix Rising, which was Ed's inspiration. I think that's something about something rising from the ashes. And before we begin, we'll start with a memorial prayer from an old friend of LB's.
Thank you. I'm Connie Huebner, for those of you who may not know me. Let's breathe into our hearts. Let's breathe into LB in our hearts. And soften, soften, soften. Divine light is pouring into him and all of us here as we celebrate the life of a great soul who used his life to serve and blessed many people. Thank you for taking him into your loving arms and steering him onward to continue his journey in the deepest heart of hearts. The love of God surrounds him. The light of God enfolds him. The presence of God watches over him. And wherever he is, God is, and all is well.
Thank you, Tim. I wasn't here when LB passed on Memorial Day. I was able to attend to him on several occasions. And today I went out to his memorial site, the place where he wanted to be buried in the earth with everything. It's Patterson Cemetery, south on Osage. It's a very beautiful place. And as I walked around, I saw that the last time anybody was buried there was 1922. And there's about 7 or 8 trees there that have never been cut. In Michigan, we call them virgin timber. Incredible trees of such stature. I did my crying there. I didn't want to do it here. But I felt like he was at such peace the way he wanted to be. He wanted to end his life that way. And incredible events came about to help that come to fruition. There are so many people. I mean, look around at all of you. You're here for one reason. LB touched your life in some way. And he touched my life for years. We were friends. But I've only known him in a very narrow way. It's like 3 blind men trying to describe the elephant. You know, he's so many ways that he impacted all of you. In many, of course, ways I don't even know of. He inspired my son to study Chinese and go there from his love of martial arts. And we were friends. We loved woodworking. There are times that we would drum together, camp together. So I had many opportunities to get to know him in a very personal, loving way. We learned, close friends learned in January that he was diagnosed with terminal cancer. And from that moment, I've never experienced such an outpouring of loving attention, not out of pity, out of just love and respect. And the result is this. Look at the magnitude that one person can bring everybody together in remembrance of his life and his passing. So many people came together right away to help out. Jonas Magrum started a meal program. Jonas, are you here? Would you come up just for a second and just tell us a little bit about that, just briefly? And if there's any, and then you can acknowledge anyone to stand up that was part of that.
I had the great gift and privilege of coordinating LB's meals for the last few months of his life. And it was a great gift and privilege for 2 reasons. One, it allowed me to interact more closely with LB. And I just want to say that in doing so, I got to know LB more closely than I ever had before. And even while he was dying, he would show kindness and attention to me. He showed interest in me, even though it was he that was passing. A very kind and loving heart. Right to the end, he was giving me guff, and he's an impeccable man who knew what he wanted. And the second reason that this was such a gift to me is that I got to work with this incredibly large and loving group of volunteers who prepared LB's meals in the most loving, graceful, impeccable way imaginable. And I want everyone to know of the great gift that all of us enjoyed. It might have looked like we were giving to LB, but the fact was that LB was giving to us. The LB, as I said, knew what he wanted. He would tell us, we would change the meal schedule, we would cancel meals, we would change the diet, and whatever LB wanted, this group of people, this team of people just right there. Yes, 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 yes. And in that, we got to enjoy the freedom of service, of stepping out of our own egos and into the flow of giving back. And it was such a great, great gift for all of us And if those of you who helped prepare LB's meals would just please stand so we can see you, please. You must be here.
Go ahead, please. Yeah.
The last thing I wanted to say is that they say that who shows up at your memorial service says a lot about you and how much you are loved. And certainly this is a full house today, demonstrating how much LB was loved. But if there's a new standard now, the new standard is you can see how deeply you were loved and respected by the quality of food that was prepared for you. I can't imagine that anyone has ever been loved more deeply than LB.
Thank you, James. There were people that, close friends of LB, that from the time they knew he was going to pass, from January on, Roger Beaton every weekend would go and pick him up. He was such a strong friend of his. He'd always go. I'd say, would you like me to come? Or would you like me to pick him up and give you a break? And it was just a wonderful time. Roger would take him out when LB could barely walk, you know, outside and drumming and wonderful things like that. At this moment, I really want to acknowledge Jennifer and Doug Hamilton. You know, when you have terminal cancer and you decide to go that route and let it have its wind, you know, there's so much involved with managing the kind of suffering and pain that could come up with that. LB was a single guy. He didn't have family to take care of, but he had this family. Look what showed up, you know. Jennifer and Doug were there as soon as, I don't know, I'll let them tell you. But I know there was a time just a couple of weeks ago, I guess it was within a month, that LB was still able to walk or get around. Maybe it was a little longer. But he was alone and he fell hard and he hurt himself. He didn't break anything. From that moment on, he was not alone in that house, day and night, for weeks, day and night. People would come in, 10 in the morning, 9:30 in the morning, stay all day. I think there was a time when Doug hadn't left in 48 hours. I think his wife said, you gotta come and have a meal with me. But many people, close friends, would come and care for him through the night. I had a chance to do that. But the care, all the difficult managing of his illness, the weight and responsibility of that was taken on by these two. So I'd really like you to come up and just say whatever you want to say. Jennifer, don't you want to come to it? It's fine. I think there's some strong reluctance to play the speaking still. We'll be okay. These two are angels in our atmosphere, along with many more out there. I see their wings today.
I'll let Dick warm up to the idea. I'm more the talker. Yeah, each person's different. Each story is different. Each person's needs are different, right? And it's a wonderful thing when
as a community, we can be that wish-fulfilling tree for that person. That we can rise up and, as he said, let go of, as Jonas said, let go of anything, of a sensibility of what we want or how we would see it, and serve. Find out and be attentive to what it is that person needs and wants at that moment, and do your level best to do it. And everyone here did that. Whether it was an active participation, like with him directly, or praying for him, meditating for him. There were a lot of ladies in the dome, we kept hearing from them how they kind of had this intentional thing they were doing for LB with their long meditations, remembering him. And he was so moved by this. He'd hear these stories and he would weep of how he heard from one thing after another, people sending their love, their concern, and what more could we do for him? LB was truly an extraordinary experience for us to work with, because one, we know him very well. Doug has known him since Doug was 15 years old. Doug may be his oldest friend. He knew him at the U of I, and they were druggies together. And LB was the first person to start TM in Iowa. And one time, the story goes, you mind if I tell this story, Doug? Are you looking at
Which story?
Well, they were, they enjoyed certain things together. And so one time, they were going to get together to do that. And LB said, no, he said, I have a natural high now. And Doug was totally intrigued. And so it's really LB that inspired Doug to learn to meditate. And and LB was inspirational in that way to a lot of people. He was an enthusiastic and passionate warrior on the path of enlightenment and all the places that took him. In my experience, the rubber hits the road in our spiritual lives when we are confronted with the end of it. And then we have to say, deeply examine within ourselves, who am I? What am I doing here? How am I going to navigate this? LB was inspirational in this regard. He was fearless, he was strong, and he gave me instructions that are pretty hard to bear when you have to see people that are uncomfortable a lot. Because really my first inclination is, let's just make him comfortable. Right? But LB wanted to be conscious. Now, there are all kinds of ways of going, and cancer isn't always painful. But liver cancer is. It's probably up there in terms of difficult paths. It is one of the top in terms of just plain old physical discomfort. But he told me, because I kept asking, he says, no, I don't want to be made unconscious, which we can do. I want to participate in this. I want to be as alert as I can be with the maximum amount of pain control. And that is the dance we walked. Right up to his, remarkably, I would say within a couple of hours, even maybe 45 minutes of when he actually left, he was still monitoring how much was going in. And he did leave. Conscious. Wow. Pretty awesome. He was right there. I don't know if Brian Staines is here. Brian was one of the people. There were a few of us there that night. Brian was at the foot of his bed, and the Strausses and a cat, Grayson, were on one side and I was on the other. We were all directing energy up and out, supporting him in his transition. But Brian had a very clear view of his face as he was transitioning. And he came to, and he said, look, had that beautiful look that sometimes they get. It's a look, it's hard to describe, because it isn't the look of this world. It's someone looking into another world. And his eyes got kind of wide, and he looking out, and he went, Mom. So LB was escorted out by his mommy. That is so lovely. But the power and the force of his chi, this is a man who had systematically cultivated this through his meditation, through the Tai Chi, through the Qigong, all the work he had done to fortify this core strength. I think accounted for why he lasted so long and navigated it so incredibly well, was he wasn't living off the energy of the physical body, he was living off his chi. And it upheld him beautifully. And what happens when someone dies is, as the light body is actually becoming more the picture, the physical body, and there, trust me, there wasn't much left by the time he died. The physical body has been rendered down to such a sort of almost insignificant scrap, you know. And then you have this enormous light body. And I think the Strausses and those of us that were there, Kat and Brian, we were all very aware of the unbelievable current. It was like putting your hands into a fire hose of power. And it was going up and out. So I have no worries for him. And as I have said before, I think the party is shifting to the other side. And we are lucky, because we will be well met. We've been all together before. We'll be together again. All is well.
Questions about if you do a question and answer, it's easy.
Go ahead. You ask me some questions.
All right. So you went to high school with him, or college, or?
It's an interesting thing. He, in a way, we're brothers, but you know, I'm one of 4 boys in my family, and I know what brothers are. But LB for me was an upperclassman. And you know, when you're in school, and really I was in junior high when I first met him, and he told the story over at Revelations about how the Vonnegut family was involved with the TM story coming to Iowa. And when Kurt Vonnegut moved his family to Iowa City for a few years, his kids were infused into the school system. So I had a Vonnegut daughter in my class. The older daughter was initially in my high school and then went on to university. And so I met LB in the student ghetto up in the Iowa City area in the old days. We were all hippies. We all had long hair. LB had this jet black hair, and even then was mysteriously gliding around in his martial arts gi. And so he lived in a house that was nearby where Edie Vonnegut, the older Vonnegut daughter, lived. And after school, I would go with my friends and we'd go over to that house. And in that circumstance, I met LB. And I've known LB, you know, ever since, as Jennifer was saying at one point, and I can remember being in a hallway saying, "Hey, LB, we're going back here." And he says, "Oh no, I don't do that anymore. I meditate." And it was like, what? This is, we're talking probably 1969, and this is the 60s. And our relationship really has been more that he was older than I was. We were in different circumstances, but we traveled together. So really, it was more than we traveled together. Our formative years in the TM movement were, of those days. We're real Gita-based kinds of meditators, and that was a time in the movement. And I thought Elby did a great job over at Revelations by saying, this is a different time in the movement. But we were of that. And really, more than anything, we're like squadron mates. And we messed, we ate together a lot. And all through the years, he and I were always looking at this really from the same kind of formative frame of reference. And even in the end, as we would, the caregivers, and particularly me, as I would come and go in the community. And I'm a journalist like he is. I love interviewing people and hearing what they have to say and that. So I'd come back to the apartment and he'd go, what's the news from the kingdom? We thought a lot alike about certain things. And so he, at one point a few days, earlier on, a few days before he passed away, usually in the morning time, mornings were always really quiet. He'd get up very early, and then the mornings were these dedicated, restful alertness. But it wasn't just, like zoning out, spacing out kind of. This was that apartment. The transcendence of that place was just palpable, and it was him. It was his energy, it was his intellect, and the morning proceeded with that for hours. And he would keep us away. He would keep us off, the caretakers, and send us off really for hours. And at times we had things to do with him, and then it was like, okay. So at one point, after kind of had him all fixed up for the morning, and then it was time to exit and just leave him for a while, he looked up at me and said, from his bed, and I was down the other end of the room, he says, Hamilton, you're on your own. We toasted. We had some grape juice at one point in the apartment, and a few of us sat around, and we toasted to LB, the transcendentalist. And at that point, it still wasn't celebratory. We were still in the midst of the final days, and so we all did that, and it was great. A life well lived, the transcendentalist, right? So I think here now. Let's do it the other way around. Let's do 3 huzzahs to this man. On the count of 3, just nice, steady huzzah, right? Hip, hip, huzzah! Hip, hip, huzzah! Hip, hip, huzzah! All right.
Is Kathy Vesely here? Kathy Vesely? Okay, she had a poem that she wanted to read.
I'm Suzanne.
Oh, did I have her on?
Yes.
Well, come on. Right person, wrong name. I was told you had a poem that you wanted to
Thank you.
read.
I didn't know there was another Vesely in town, so. This poem came to me because my father had a number of things happening to him about a week and a half ago. And I talked with my father after all of his visits to the emergency room. He's 92. He's a physician, and he was very objective, and he was just objectively going through every detail of what had happened to him and saying, well, they'll do this and they won't do that. His mind is very clear, and he still practices medicine that he did for indigents in our town. So I wrote a poem for my father, and I thought, well, maybe LB would like to hear this poem, and so I sent it, and this is the poem. It's called Physician. As you approach completion of mortal life, and you, in your intimate knowledge of the machine called the body, knowing each hesitation, each inconsistency, each small departure from wholeness, having seen its destiny reflected in the long line of other bodies you have cared for, do not forget that temple you also are, the one who dwells within its gates, who never sleeps, who never hesitates, that one unwavering flame. He holds you always, the one who taught you rest in the midst of battle, the force behind your hand of healing at each success, who has always been within and waiting to be seen at last.
Two people that were very instrumental in being able to fulfill the wishes of LB's burial are two very close friends of his for a long time, John and Patty Strauss, and I'd love for them to come up and maybe describe a little bit of what happened and anything else. John, thank you, John, for arranging the music when we came in too. So this is quite a story, and really, I wasn't there actually when it happened, but John and Patty were.
First thing I want to do is tell a little story, excuse my voice. About a week before LB passed, he had stopped eating, but still taking some fluids. And Doug and I were standing next to his bed, looking down. He had been spending a lot of time very quiet and inward with his eyes closed. And he looked up at us, opened his eyes and looked up at us, and he said, "Is this the end?" And we weren't quite sure what to say, so we said, "Well, soon." So he proceeded to go through, take a few breaths, and do one of these sort of dying acts, you know. And he lay there motionless for a few seconds. And then he opened one eye and said, "How was that?" There were a lot of examples like that, pretty much up to the end, his wry humor. So many people here are aware of all the influence he's had on this community and how he's touched lives here. But in going through some of his things, we came upon some evaluations from his students in China. And I thought it would be interesting to share the impact he had on people on the other side of the planet. So these are just excerpts. There are stacks of this. It says, "Dear LB, I'm very glad to be with you for a whole of my freshman year. Thank you very much. It's a very interesting class, different from any class I've taken. What you told us most is to think. I benefit a lot from it. We are very interested in oral English lessons that are many happy and interesting moments in it. Our teacher has a good sense of humor. He has a beautiful voice and he sometimes sings songs for us. I didn't know that LB sang. LB, you will return back to USA. We feel very sad. You are our friends. We have known about each other nearly 1 year. I'll often email you, so reply to me, to my emails, okay? I remember you were my first contact with foreigners. Summer, you often wear a blue shirt, jeans and sandals, sometimes with sunglasses. Maybe you don't know how cool you are. The thing impressed me most was the video we watched in the class. A girl who played with leopards shocked me. The girl was so brave to play with such dangerous animals. Also, another funny thing was LB's humor. When William helped LB turn on the sound, LB said, "William, you are the man." It made me laugh. I still remember the first several classes. We played some games in the classroom. So interesting. I remember the debates we discussed, especially the topic, eating dogs or not. So we had a good time with you these 2 years. I believe I will never forget the first foreign teacher through my life. The thing that impressed me deeply was the welcome new arrivals party. We all expected that you would take part in this party with your girlfriend. So when you were playing the guitar on the stage, we still looked about for your girlfriend. Nevertheless, you should told us that the guitar was so-called my girlfriend. As a result, we were surprised. What a humorous man you are. I remember that one time, he sat on a table and gave us a lesson about how to relax our whole body. In that class, we all did what he told us to and repeated it again and again together with him. It feels really good to me. No Chinese teacher would do things like that. Dear teacher, as time goes by, we have spent a whole year together looking back to the past classes. What impresses me most is your love story one day you shared with us. Once I was wondering why you chose to live alone and why you couldn't meet the right girl who belonged to you. But when I saw the grieved tears falling down from your cheek, suddenly I understood the sentence, everyone who don't want to fall in love is filled with an impossible person in his heart. Love is marvelous at the same time. It brings sorrow to us. I admire that when you're faced with the loss of your sweetheart, you can still live your own life passionately, optimistically, and positively. After spending such a long time together, your enthusiasm towards life affects me deeply. When we were having the Tai Chi competition, you were there. When we were performing chorus, you were there. When you have time, you always travel around to know more about the world, which makes your life wonderful and interesting. Every time after we made a presentation, you would remark based on your own thought. You made me know that though life doesn't always give us good things, life is still fine for everyone. Our dear LB, you are friendly and sometimes cute. You tried to diversify your class with movies, videos. I liked it. The only flaw is that maybe you had profounding ideas which we are hard to echo with. But never mind, I like listening to you talking about things and sharing ideas with us. New thought, new knowledge. What's more, your skinny figure is envied by many girls who want to lose weight. Sometimes he makes all his effort to delight us by making grimaces and funny performances. He is so good at it that we all think it's a pity that he doesn't play in TV programs or movies. He told us to speak Kung Fu English at the beginning of this term. He disheartens us to recite or read from a piece of paper when making presentation. He encourages us to speak freely and boldly. He says, open your mouth, practice, polish it, and you can finally succeed in speaking Kung Fu English. I'm a lucky dog to encounter with LB, our indefatigable, amiable writer with sharp perspective and foresighted insight. We snapped and made film in class. These sassy expressions worn on his face will also be kept at the bottom of my heart, as well as my classmates. Our respect for LB stays put. I'm almost done. One day, Zona asked LB to talk something about life. LB told us the story about his girlfriend. Life is full of mystery. We are not the God. We can't anticipate what will happen in the future. Throughout our lives, many things always happen unexpectedly. I think the only thing we can do is to enjoy our lives. We should do everything carefully so that we will not regret, even if tomorrow the earth will disappear. To be honest, I think our oral class not only teaches us how to speak English well, but also teaches us how to live a life a lot fully. Teaches us enjoy our life. LB, I will always remember your tears when you talked about your lover. In that class, I realized what is the true love. I admire you can have such kind of deep love for so many years. Every love story has its unique beauty, and your true love is the most beautiful thing among these.
The last day, a lot of people have been there, as Jennifer said, day in, day out, night, amazing. And the LB had been talking for weeks about having a last party at his apartment. And every once in a while, I'd say, I saw so-and-so and so, should we bring him over and have a party? And he'd go, soon, soon. And he said that like many times. And it was getting to be pretty much obvious it was going to be the end, so I just sort of gave up on it. And the last day, people started coming in, like really coming in a lot more and staying. And that whole day, LB's mouth was open, his eyes were rolled back, and he was just breathing. And Jennifer said immediately, he's conscious. So he can hear you, he's here, he's very much with us, so you can say whatever you want and he'll get it. And his body was struggling and going on and on. And there were so many people there just sitting there and loving him and stroking him, and just being there and meditating. And we realized by the end of the day, the last few people went to bed around 11, and or about 10:30, I guess. And we realized this was a party. This is the party that he had been wanting, and it was just so natural and perfect. And around 11, around 10:30, he started doing a rattle in his chest. And Jennifer came in and said, that's the death rattle. And I'd always thought it was like that last breath was the death rattle. She said, no, we can go on and on. And she said, this could go on for a while, actually, which we'd been saying for, weeks and weeks and months. And we thought, it might go on, but this is it. And so there was something that seemed pretty clear then. That was the thing. But still, it went on for quite a while, and finally Jennifer said, I think we might just go home. And John and I looked at each other, and we thought, I think we'll go home and get some rest. We'll come back first thing in the morning. And as we were just kind of looking at the door, there was like kind of a gulp in the rattle, and Jennifer said, went right back to position and said, this is different. So we all stayed, and it was kind of like she said, like a vortex. We couldn't leave. We just didn't want to. And we were just there with he just kept doing this pretty intense. And as Jennifer was saying, this has been going on for a long time, but some people go on for a long time because they're afraid and they're holding on. And LB had no fear at all. He was just he was being conscious and allowing the body to just do what it had to do to finally wind down. And we knew it was winding down. It got really obvious. So we had our hands, most of the time we were all caressing him, and there was some unspoken thing that made us not touch him for a while, kind of towards the end, particularly around 1 o'clock. We had our hands over him and up like just directing the energy out. And Jennifer was helping us tell us what was going on. And she would speak to him really sweetly and very softly and just say, stay conscious, LP, we're here, be in the light. And he was. And so I got to be, I was, in the moment, I was kneeling next to him and I had my hand over his heart. And I just slipped my other hand under the back of his neck. And I was like right up close to him. And just watching the breath come in here, and it just kept getting a little bit slower and a little bit slower. And you just knew this is a wind down. And I would look here mostly to see that breath, because it would take a long time in between. And finally, we knew this is the last one, and it just ended and labored, and then it just ended. And with that, Jennifer immediately said, stay conscious, LB, because his heart was still going. And she reached for the tulsi leaf and put it in his mouth, pretty big one, put it in his mouth. His mouth, even though he wasn't breathing, accepted it somehow. It was really very cool. And she poured Ganges water all over his mouth and lips, and we just all started chanting that Gayatri mantra, and we did it over and over and over. And then John put that Deva Primal on the Gayatri mantra, and we just sat there and just loved him. And the amazing thing was, at the moment the breath stopped for me, my experience was, I was surprised. It was a birth. It just felt like birth. It was really unusual. And then we all tangibly felt the room was joyful. It was just like big. And it wasn't centered in his body anymore, but it was like really in the room. And I'd heard something like that before, but I didn't understand it until we were actually there. It was quite incredible. And then we asked Jennifer, when do we bathe? Because we'd all decided if we were there, we would help bathe him. And in fact, just like hours before, she'd had a little sheet of paper saying, check off if you want to be called back and bathe him, and several of us did. And, you know, it was 1:30 in the morning, and so she said, yes, we do it now. So we bathed, and she brought up buckets of hot water and rags with white angelica, and I'd always wondered how that might be and feel like, and it was the most loving. Every single moment was precious and perfect, and every bit of his skin, everything was just the most endearing thing, and we were just lovingly bathed him. And then she brought out hot ghee, not hot, but melted, and we rubbed that all over him, all over his hair, just everything, and then blotted that down. And then, and the music is playing, and then we got his Tai Chi outfit out that he had wanted, in a red shirt. And while we were putting that on, John put on Om Mani Padme Hum to the Tibetan music version. So it was like incredibly perfect for putting on his Tai Chi outfit. And then John tied his belt the correct way, and we had lots of flowers, and we put them all over, and it was quite beautiful, And the next day, it was going to be a couple more days, but a lot of circumstances happened, and the next evening, around 6:30, just a few of us, it just was so last minute, we were out at the cemetery, and Tim Freeberg had made a plank, which there's a drawing on that memorabilia table that was all set. It was exactly the directions that LB had wanted. Beautiful pine plank, and the guys lowered it down into the hole. And even, we were commenting yesterday that even the bulldozer, the gravedigger, tamped all of the earth down so lovingly with this thing. Just kept, and it was just like the most wonderful thing. The backhoe. What did I say? Yeah, the backhoe. And we had some tambourines, and we read out the Gita, and it was just absolutely perfect. And it was a day that had been storming the night he died, and then storming all that day. And we decided, we told the gravedigger, rain or shine, we're going to do this today. And when we got there, we were driving out there, and it was raining, and we just thought, well, this is going to be interesting, because you have to walk pretty far in, as any of you might see when you go out there. The clouds started, they just parted, and it was blue sky and beautiful, and it was rolling green everywhere, and there was beautiful warm mist everywhere, and it couldn't have been more perfect. And when we walked back to the car, we all got out of our cars, and it all came back, thought it over, and rained like crazy. So it was all beautiful. So I wanted to share it with you. So yeah.
There are so many people that need to be acknowledged, and I'm going to try and acknowledge a few. We are going to open it up in a few minutes for other people that know and would like to mention something. Certainly Tim and Debbie Shriver for creating the beer and the shroud. Thank you so much. That was very beautiful. Angela Weilander and Kat Grayson, you were so beautifully always there, vigilant, helping. Day and night. Motier Hoskins, did I say her name right? Motier? Mo, yeah. Thank you so much for all the savor that you did, being there. Bruce Grady. Bruce, are you here? Is that you, Bruce? Bruce, hi. Bruce, for such beautiful helping and kind care. I heard, and in my direct experience, I worked with Bruce years ago when my father-in-law died, and Bruce has a way of dealing with things that are so beautiful and kind. Of course, Brian Staines for sitting as well. Kelly Custer. Kelly, are you here? Kelly wanted to, hi Kelly. We just wanted to acknowledge LB. Sometimes a yes, Kelly's coming over and she'd be over there and care for him. Eric Randall, Eric, I know you sat with him through the nights as well. There are several parts of his life that I really wasn't involved with. I didn't know that much about. Tom, are you here? Tom Christofiat? Tom? Tom, would you come up just for a second and tell about his writings or some of the things that you like doing that just real quickly? Tom is what I would call at least a literary person. And my understanding, I wasn't around when there were a lot of writings that were going on with LB. So, Tom, can you tell us a little about that? That side.
I'm sure most of you know that one of the things LB was famous for was the Survival in Paradise newspaper that began to be published in early 1993 for a while. And you may know, many of you probably do know, that LB expressed the wish a number of weeks ago that some of his written materials be memorialized on the web. And so I've been involved in that. It took a little while because as people who were there know, LB was very much in charge of what was going on and what pace and with what decisions. And so there was some periods where it wasn't possible to move forward on this project until he made some decisions. And it's funny, when I was there just not too many days ago, seeing him, right when I was leaving, he said, he was pretty much whispering at that point when he was speaking, it was quiet. So he leaned right up to him and he said, I hope I will rally soon so that we can get some more materials for the site. So that didn't quite happen, but so he was still thinking about what he wanted to maybe even write at that point and distribute. As you know, LB was bold enough to declare that he was a public intellectual. That was how he saw himself, and there was no pride in that. That was just an accurate statement of who he was and how he saw his role. And so what I've been doing recently, just in the last couple of days now, is scanning and translating the original Survival in Paradise newspapers to text so that they could be posted on the web. And in doing so, I'm having to read every word because the OCR program doesn't do that good of a job. So it garbles some things. So you read every word carefully. So I'm reading it again. I don't even know if I read all the issues back then, but I'm reading them now. And it's really amazing to see how he was. His mission was to inspire open dialogue, to frank discussion of whatever issues seemed to be important. He cared deeply about the movement, about Maharishi, about this knowledge, and about the planet. And all of those things were fair game to be investigated and discussed as a community. And so he was one of the primary early forces in encouraging an open discussion of those things that are important. And his newspaper was one of the first public instances of that, but he always continued that through his time. But reading those early issues, as you can all do, there's 3 of them up now, the 3rd one's still being polished up. There's a total of 9 or 10 of them, and there will be other materials as well. It's at lbshriver.wordpress.com. Hopefully someday it will be lbshriver.com to make it easier for people to remember. But you can follow along if you want and read some of them. But what's surprising is he stated his mission. He said, I am not here to, this is not a gripe fest. I am here to just draw us together and inspire dialogue. And that's what he did. And reading those first 3 issues, it's remarkable how balanced and restrained and fair he was, and how much he did deeply care about the reasons that we're all here in this community. So it's a wonderful experience reading them. You probably know that LB also had other interests and wrote other kinds of things. He was very interested in politics and the fate of the planet and so many other things. And so we'll be adding whatever of those things we can as well. Just on that note, practically speaking, if I may raise a practical point, if anybody was interested in fulfilling that particular, helping to fulfill this particular wish of LB's, there's 2 kinds of things. That is getting his material permanently in electronic form on the web. You can contribute in a couple of ways. One would be if anyone has time and wants to get involved in the process of sifting through and converting, let me know. I'm Tom Krzysztofiak, by the way. Christo@natel.net if you want to reach me. But the other thing we could do is there's a certain small amount of funds that have to be acquired in order to maintain this over the years. My goal is to have just a little bit of money to allow this thing to be going for the next 10 years at least. And so if anybody's interested in making a very small symbolic memorial to fulfill a particular desire of his as a writer and as a public intellectual, that would be appreciated. The fees are small. It just costs a certain amount to maintain a domain and to point it at the other things so that it's lbshriver.com for the next many years. So if you'd like to, again, contact me, let me know. So just as one small personal note, LB wanted to inspire people to think and to write and to talk about things that were important to them. And it just so happens in my own life, I've done a little bit of writing as well. And it started because of LB, or he was there at the time. And what it was at the first open meeting that was held in the Dome, at least that I recall, probably around '93, with Bevan and probably Keith Wallace and others, where there was an open session in the Dome where you could ask anything. And so people were up asking anything. And I got up with a certain amount of trepidation and spoke some things about how I was perceiving how the movement was progressing. And when I was done, LB came right over to me on the phone there in the Men's Dome and said, I'd like to write something about this in my paper. And I said, how about if I do? And so he said, sure. So that was really the beginning of kind of, in my own personal case, fulfilling LB's mission, which is to inspire people to think and write and talk together about the issues about the community. And so that's when I sort of shifted from many years of teaching TM and getting established in the community to starting to think and write and discuss some of these things myself, which he's encouraged us all to do and for which we'll always be grateful. Thank you.
before LB passed, he asked me to give a concert after he passed. But he left before I knew what it was before. So we may follow up with that. At this moment, I'd like to open it up to any people that have brief stories that they'd like to come on up. Please come on up.
Yeah, you're dead, LB. He's here. My name's Keating. I knew LB at the University of Iowa. I see something holy and significant that this man did. It has to do with transcendental meditation, because that's what most of us have done. Not just his teaching TM, and he helped inspire me to become a teacher when I saw him after he initiated one day, coming down the stairs in this beautiful state of being. But when the transition happens from Kali Yuga to Sat Yuga, it goes from deep ignorance to a very high ascended place. And that juncture point on a planet takes certain people to help it forward. And in my judgment, LB was a point man to bring me and a lot of us forward from the old era that we grew up with into this one that's unfolding. My father was wounded. Many of our fathers were wounded. So the manhood that I had to get into from the Sterling Men's Weekend, although it got kind of rough in some respects, was very necessary. And he brought it forward to us and was something I stood on and went from. The transition that happens in our lives when we came here to Fairfield was part of that step too. And then having families to go forward. LB's a TM teacher, and this was his role in my judgment. He didn't know who he was. Tony Nader didn't know who he was, King Rajaram. John the Baptist didn't know who he was, Elijah. Maharishi didn't know who he was. The same with me, the same with you. We don't truly yet know who we are. We're wonderful, we're divine. And the fulfillment of Maharishi's SCI is for each of us to become Maharshi. That's just the truth of who we are. And I think if LB had a message to say, he'd say what he just said to Doug Hamilton. Hamilton, you're on your own. But he said to me and all of us, you're on your own. We don't need the things that we used to need when we were growing up in this movement, the movement and all that sort of stuff. The breakaway process had to be done, and he helped do that. So that was a big thing that was necessary. Anyway, it's time for us, and LB's gone, the era is over as far as I'm concerned, but it was fulfilled. He fulfilled it, and here it is, the community. The way you women took him and blessed him and bathed him, and his mother there, mother brings him in, mother brings him into the next birth. It was beautiful. We have a community now, and he's been a point man in my judgment about this whole community unfoldment, and here it is today, fulfilled. LB, 3 words I can say to you, man, that really speak it. Jai Guru Dev.
Who else would like to come up and tell the story? Kat.
Everybody's taller than I am. I've learned things about, I call him cousin. I've learned things about my cousin. We were not related. We had a long-standing in-joke that both of us, turns out, were descended of Charlemagne. But so is everybody in the Western Hemisphere. So I've learned things about my cousin today that I had not known. I didn't know he could sing, didn't know he could play guitar. But one thing that I did know about my cousin was he was very, very passionate about following one's dharma, whatever that might be, and it's different for all of us. And I am and will always be deeply grateful for him returning me to mine, because one of easily the most out-of-character things I've ever done was to join the military, especially the Marine Corps. And I was a medic for the Marine Corps, and I started working in the naval hospitals and the VA hospitals doing terminal care when I was 17. And it felt right then, but I was too young, and I didn't know how to, I was so angry, and the medical establishment was so corrupted, and I didn't know how to process these deaths through me in a way that didn't affect my peace. And I was gifted to be able to assist Jennifer. Thank you very much for allowing me in the final couple weeks of Cousin's life and his death. And I've seen many deaths, and his was easily the most conscious and the most beautiful death I've ever seen. And taking care of him has restored me to the knowledge that this is what I should be doing. And I will always thank him for that, because I'm really not a database administrator, and I'm really not, you know, any of these careers that I've done over my life. What I am is a caregiver, and I should do that. So thank you, Cousin, for that. And just a little side note. The last memorial in Fairfield I went to was for a dear friend who was a fellow computer programmer. And he was cantankerous and curmudgeon-y and just angry about everything. And I felt him sitting by me the whole time just bitching about how everyone was telling about how lovely he was and how beautiful a soul he was. And nobody said that he could swear like a sailor. And nobody said, you know, that if there was a situation that was a little odd or corrupt or unbeautiful, he would cut through it, and he was just, you know, his spirit was the whole ceremony. And I would just like to say that LB was a little curmudgeon-y, but he loved all of you, and he would have loved this. He would have loved this. He's gone, there's no sense of him here, but he would have loved this. Thank you for being here.
That was my daughter, Kat. I think she was probably 6 or 7 years old when we met LB in Iowa City in about the mid-70s. I was a doctoral student there, and LB and I were perfectly suited and perfectly situated to be intellectual snobs together. I hate to admit it, but it is true that it took both of us a little longer than strictly necessary to learn that kindness for all that lives is a much better goal in life than somebody's idea of intellectual achievement. I went to China to teach in 2002 and stayed 2 years. And I did so spectacularly well there that the university I was at would hire anyone on the strength of my recommendation. So when LB said he might like to go to China, I said, no problem, they'll give you a job, and they did. And I thought about this all night, whether to tell this story or not, because it's a sad story, but I think if I tell it, then there can be some smoothing out and forgiving for what has happened. I call him Cousin too. We were. So Cousin was in China, and he wrote that he had met a young lady named Ji Xiaoli, and that he loved her and was thinking of bringing her back to Fairfield. And I said, oh my God. And I wrote back, Cousin, this thing has a Shakespearean feel to it. And we kind of laughed a little bit about it, about the image of LB as Romeo howling at the moon. then Ji Xiaoli's father put her in the car and crashed it on purpose. And Elby could not speak about it without breaking down to cry. It's kind of hard for me too. But I want some forgiveness and understanding to come out of this. And so I'll try to put this into a cultural context for you so that it makes sense. One thing is that racism is alive and well in China, just as it is here, in spite of Obama, largely even because of Obama. But that's another story. In China, the word foreigner has been a dirty word for centuries. And those feelings are part of the situation, but the deeper situation is the idea of face. It's unbelievable how deep and how debilitating, culturally debilitating, that concept is for the Chinese people. And Ji Xiaoli's relationship with LB ruined her face and that of her family for generations back. So what her daddy was desperately trying to do was save her face and his, to crash that car and make it look like an accident, because suicide would also have been a loss of face. Ji Xiaoli survived, but she spent months in the hospital, and I don't know how badly injured she is, but I'll find out because I have friends in that town still. But I want all your thoughts and prayers for the young lady whom LB loved at the end of his life. Thank you.
Yes, please come forward.
Yeah. Anybody else like to say this?
I'm amazed at all the stories, and I just knew LB in a very superficial way, but it made a big difference to me. And I wanted to share that with you. It all started in 1983, 94. That was about when Mr. Ford died. I remember that. And I was in a pod room, and I had these polyhedra, these geometrical solids, all out of paper, hanging there, and I was really interested in math and art. And so this issue of the Fairfield Source, which was a very early issue, has a back issue with a picture of me in that pod room, and LB wrote this thing about me, and I wrote the statement of purpose. And he just encouraged me. And that encouragement really meant a lot, and I was in this newspaper, and I thought, we got some attention for this really obscure kind of thing I was doing, making polyhedron hanging from the ceiling. What's this about? So because I got encouragement from LB and from other people here in the Fairfield community, I went on to the University of Montreal, and I got a master's degree in spatial design geometry. I had to learn French from scratch and go to a master's degree program in a French-speaking university. It was an obscure thing. But it led to some wonderful things. I was a part-time student at Harvard to finish the degree, to get some extra tutelage from a professor that I loved there. And all this sort of happened because I took this odd direction. And LB, as you probably know, is a very eclectic person. If you look at his books, they're all over the map. The guy was interested in so many things. Anyway, one thing led to another, and I got involved in a computer and the internet, and I got a job with the first internet service provider on the planet to give dial-up access to the general public. And then I went, you know, I just got involved in all this stuff, and I had a career, and I finally transferred back to California and went to Apple Computers and tech on the phones. And all this because we got some little spark of encouragement back in the early days when something's tender, when an idea is just growing. And I know that LB is interested in geometry. I don't know in exactly what context, but I eventually fell in with the origami crowd. And this is, they do geometrical things, and this is out of a single sheet of uncut paper, a big square. And this also is a single sheet of paper, uncut. And this is a sort of martial arts thing, not thinking of fighting, it's just a difficult thing to do. There's a lot of discipline, there's a lot of learning, and there's a lot of self-mastery it's important to me. And anyway, this was a part of LB. And some simpler pieces. There's a little sushi container, little things like this. These are fairly easy that anybody can learn. But anyway, towards the end, I met with LB in Thai Delhi, and he expressed an interest in various things, and I showed him the geometry I'd done, and I thanked him for his kindness in the past. And then I helped him with an iPad mini, you know, and helping him to learn how to use it, because he was going to write his last memoirs on this thing just by talking, because it takes dictation, and it'll just write down. So he bought one, and I gave him some little tool. He had little lessons. I visited him, and that was my connection with LB, which is very different from this meals and caring and all this heartfelt stuff that I've been listening to. You're such a beautiful community to help in this way. But anyway, that's my story. And there is one last little thing I want to show you, because I used this at my mother and my father's memorial service. And this is the body when it's time to go, just lets go, and the soul is free to go.
My name is Lila, and LB was a friend of mine. I have a story about LB that I hesitated to tell, but it's so utterly hilarious that I wanted to tell you about it. I knew LB as a very serious intellectual and a very spiritual person. And I think I saw a side of him one day that not many of us have ever seen, and I never saw it again. 19 years ago, I had a 40th birthday party, and I invited 25 people to Regina's for a catered dinner, U-shaped seating. We're all dressed nicely. It was a very nice dinner. Candles, place settings. LB was seated as far away from me as he could get. I mean, he just was just there. I was in the front. He was way there on the bottom of the U. And so in the middle of this dinner party, we're just having a great time. And all of a sudden, LB speaks up, so the whole room can hear him. I have to tell you, I own a lingerie business. It's called Panties.com. So all of a sudden, LB speaks up. He says,
can't look at you without wondering what color panties you're wearing. I was absolutely mortified. More than that, because LB says things that everyone else thinks, but nobody else thinks to say. I began to wonder what people think when I walk past. But it only got worse. He then said, I always imagine that they're red and made out of lace. I was just speechless. When you own a lingerie business like I do, you have to give as good as you take. So I said, well, LB, I'm sorry to disappoint you, but they're pink, they're cotton lycra, and they're made by Christian Dior. So I said I never wear red. But I wanted to tell the story because it's an example of LB's very, very strong sense of humor and his incredible directness. LB, I realized, I hadn't thought about this incident for about 19 years. And when I was thinking about it today before I came, I realized that LB didn't do what he did and say what he was saying because he wanted to or he had to come out and do it. I think LB was the way LB was because he was hardwired that way. He couldn't help it. He was constitutionally incapable of being anything but absolutely saying whatever came to his mind that was truthful. I thought it was a funny story and I wanted to share it with you. Thank you.
I learned about, actually, my wife's relationship with LB when she told me about the day she almost drowned him, so I thought maybe she should talk about it.
Well, I can't ever think of LB without thinking about the most embarrassing day of my life. This happened in the mid-70s sometime. We were teaching TM. I was in Grand Rapids, Michigan, which is my hometown. LB somehow was in Muskegon, Michigan. However he got there, I can't imagine. But, you know, when we had state initiator meetings, he would be there, regional, local meetings, he would be there. And, you know, we weren't particularly good friends, but we were teachers, and so we had that in common. But one day I had a party of all the bunch of TM people, and mostly, well, the local meditators and teachers. And of course, Muskegon, where he was only 30 miles away, so I invited him. And it was an afternoon party at my parents' home, which was on you have to visualize this to get the story. It was up on a hill overlooking a lake. And there was a swimming party. And there was a dock that went out on the lake, and everyone, was supposed to bring their bathing suits, and we were going to swim and boat and have a good time, and then have a dinner in the evening. So, and my parents weren't home. I was used to having parties since high school when my parents weren't home. So this was another one. So anyway, we were all down there and LB hadn't arrived, and I'd given him elaborate directions how to get to that home and so on. So finally, late in the afternoon, after we'd all been swimming most of the day, LB shows up, and we're down on the water and we're looking up the hill, and we see him arrive and we're waving, "Hello, LB," and he walks in his very, that slow way that he walked. He walked like down the hill and across, there were stairs and then down more stairs, and didn't hurry at all. But he was fully clothed. I actually, when he was up there, we said, "Change into your bathing suit." He didn't bring his bathing suit. So he was fully clothed, and of course, I had a friend who was kind of mischievous, and we looked at each other, and he's got his clothes on. It's a swimming party, and let's throw him in the water. So we waited till and we gave him all the hints we possibly could that he was going to be thrown into the water. so that he could back out if he chose to. We went up to him, we saw he had this nice watch on, we took his watch off, and we said, come on out here, walk up to the end of the dock. And he had his glasses on, and that was probably the mistake, we took his glasses off. And, you know, we were talking about, you know, in kind of joking ways, the water's really warm, you're gonna like it a lot. And anyway, he walks out to the very end of the dock, and my friend and I kind of winked at each other, and all of a sudden both of us jumped up and pushed LB in with a big splash and a big flourish, laughing, and you know, everyone else was laughing, and LB just sinks. And it was deep, very deep. I don't know how he must have pushed himself up on off the bottom, which was probably 14 feet down. And we were waiting for him, you know, to come up, to laugh with us. And his lips broke the surface, and he goes, can't swim. And with that, like 3 or 4 guys jump into the water and, you know, go down to the bottom and drag him up. And I'm like going, oh my God, what did I just do? It was my idea, I have to admit. And so he comes up, you know, just completely, you know, bedraggled. And he sits on, he doesn't look at me. He doesn't say anything. You know, he really knows how to make you feel bad. It seemed to me like he was really, so anyway. So he comes up, he sits on the end of the dock, and everyone is like, oh, there were a few things that we hadn't removed. One was his extra pair of glasses that had been in his pocket, and a couple other shoes, his shoes. So anyway, then he's saying, I don't have my extra glasses, I don't have my shoes, and then there's a diving, you know, frenzy, the guys diving down to retrieve everything that he had lost. And by that time I had run up and gotten a towel, and I was like, you know, taking care of him. We took him up to the, you know, back up to the house, up on top of the hill, and he gave him a change of clothes, and I put all of his clothes in the dryer, and I'm like, you know, just mortified, humiliated. You know, what am I going to do next to make him happy? And but LB, you know, he really, for the rest of our life, this happened in the 70s, I don't ever see him without him reminding me of how I almost drowned him. And that night at the dinner, I made sure he had the best food and served it to him and trying to make up. I never have made it up. I'm the person who tried to drown L.B. Shriver. I admit it. I wasn't trying to drown him. I don't admit that part. I almost drowned him. But that his personality just came, I mean, he just came through when I think of that whole incident about the joke, if you want to call it a joke, was on me. And anyway, we're still great friends, and we have shared a lot of other times since then, but that's the one I always remember when I think of LB. So remember, he doesn't know how to swim. That's something else. Who was it? Learn things about it. Thank you.
One more. And then Ed Noyes, are you here, Ed? Okay, good, because I want you to be able to talk about this.
I wasn't going to tell this story, but on the heels of Connie's story, I had recently moved back to Fairfield, and I have a acre pond that I was responsible for in my backyard. And it was my job each summer to put the aerator and the fountain out in the pond, which required rowing out in an old metal rowboat or canoe. And
heaving this big, heavily corded, weighted, it had a cement block as an anchor out of the boat into the center of the pond, and then leaving it there for the summer. And then when the cold months were coming, it was my job to pull it up and put it in the canoe and take it in for the winter and store it. So I've never been a great canoe woman, a canoeist. And LB was a new acquaintance. We were hanging out in a similar crowd of people who enjoyed drumming and that kind of thing. So I asked LB if he would be willing to come over and man the canoe and help me with this task. And it was an unusually warm, but it was November. And it wasn't in the 80s or even in the 70s, or it might not have even been in the 60s. It was probably in the 50s. It was November. And he was in the back of the canoe with the paddle, and I knew how to lug it up and what was at the other end, and I heaved this big cement block in, and it was covered with slime and all this, so we loaded in, and both of us are barefoot and in warm enough clothing to be comfortable in some 50-degree weather. And he canoed us back to the shore, and I figured we had made it, and I exuberantly got up and turned the canoe over. And LB plunged into the cold water about 8 feet back. And I went through the same routine as Connie. I immediately got I had a huge, one of these huge bathrobes. He was given a bathrobe, an opportunity to change his clothes. I ran them through the washer, I ran them through the dryer, I made dinner for him. And as recently as a month ago, he spoke about that as my attempted assassination. LB, I hope that you have forgiven me.
We're just about ready to conclude with refreshments in the back, and I'm sure there's many more stories.
I wonder if I could just say a question.
Sure, come on up for a brief story, sure. And you've got to wait.
My name is Constance, and I came to NIU in 1974 when we first moved here, and I remember LB from that time. And ever since then, over the years, it's just, hi, recognition, hi. Until he came back from China, and I saw him standing in front of everybody's, and a light went off in my brain, and I ran up to him. I don't think I'd ever really spoken to him a sentence before. I said, how would you feel about teaching a class in Tai Chi? And he said, well, yeah, I've been thinking about that. So I got his phone number, and he got mine. I didn't hear anything, and I just kept calling and calling and calling. I'd loved Tai Chi my whole life and always wanted to learn it. And I had that feeling that he was the one. And so finally, he started a class, and I'm sure there's several of the students here today, and I just felt it would somehow bring some completion to that he did that right at the end of his life, that he taught this, he taught 2 last Tai Chi classes. And for me, it was actually a very great fulfillment of something I wanted my whole life, and that I now have this. Certainly it's a lifetime thing that you learn more all the time, but I have the seed of it from LB, and it was just a great, great gift. And it gave me that opportunity to get to know him more in a beautiful context. So I just wanted to, present that aspect of him. That's how I knew him, through that. And he embodied Tai Chi in his whole way of being that, I feel I continue to learn from. So thank you. Are there any of the Tai Chi students here? If there are, just stand out, would you?
Yeah. Oh, all right. All right. We'd like to conclude. Ed Noyes wants to tell us about the, well, let him tell you. Thank you so much for your inspiration and for...
Good job, David. David did a great job. Does it remind you of like Father David or something? Something's working out there. So I got to know LB years ago as part of the Sterling Men's Organization. I was so fortunate that there was a means for me to get to know him. I remember we went to Poughkeepsie, New York for a big weekend, and there was a big group of us that was helping to support the weekend. And at that time, this was probably about 1985, 89, 90, something like that, Poughkeepsie was basically shut down. It got taken over by gangs. And big, huge brick buildings, bank buildings were boarded up in the downtown. But there was a hall there so that we could do the men's weekend there. So we were staying in this hotel down the road, and we had to walk from the hotel to get to where the weekend was. And I thought, man, this really isn't a very safe place to be walking, because I knew it was overtaken by gangs, and it was the drug thing. And one morning I go outside and I'm looking around, and I already decided I wasn't going to walk out by myself. And I look out at this vacant lot, and I see L.B. Shriver doing his Qigong or his Tai Chi out there by himself. And I go, man, this guy's got some balls, you know. So really impressed me about him. And I knew him over the years back and forth, and obviously I knew he went to China, and I knew he was heartbroken when he came back. I knew a little of the story. And then I heard that we had talked, before I knew that he had cancer. I was looking for an editor because I'm working on some political philosophy books, and I found out, somebody said, well, L.B. Shriver, he'd be a great editor. So we had long talks about political philosophy, and he was very excited, and you know, that was our intention, was to write and edit these books together that we had common agreement upon. And then he came down with his cancer. So, you know, then for some reason I had acquired this property, and I was thinking about LB, and I had an intuition that he wanted to express himself, you know. I mean, I knew who he was enough to know that he wanted to express himself on more of a large scale in an unusual way. So this thought came to my mind, the life and times of L.B. Shriver. And then we would host it here in this hall. So, and we would give it to the men because we wanted that form of confidentiality. We wanted to be able to say whatever you wanted to say and feel safe, which is one of the things that we got from being together as men. So anybody that was there, it was a magnificent event. In fact, LB was so gracious that it was recorded by 3 separate video cameras. And a friend of mine told me that she'd watched the video like 3 or 4 times already and cried at it because it was so moving. So that was another one of his gifts that he gave to us. And then he decided on his own to do the public thing above the Revelations, which was co-ed, and it was a similar type thing where he told the story of his life. And so that's pretty amazing, really, I think, that he agreed to do that and that he did it, and he did it with such grace and dignity. Now, strangely enough, through the grace of Jonas Magrum, I got involved with the meals program, and an email came back that he had this old bookcase that he wanted to have refinished. Now, this is like ridiculous, I'm thinking. So Jonas was wanting to know who would help him with his old bookcase. It was just this framed pine bookcase. It didn't have a back to it. It was unfinished. And so I said, well, I can do that. And so I got my friend Randy Lockey, who I get to do almost everything that I can't do on my own. So pretty much Randy did the majority of it. We did it some together. We moved it, and we worked on it, and we finished it. And in between the time when it was done, I get this email from LB, and it says, WTF. He said, how long does it take to finish my bookcase? So that's probably the last email I ever got from LB. No, actually, I explained it to him, and he said, all right, that's fine. So we finished the bookcase and we went back. And of course, in the meantime, we had to move the books out of the bookcase and put them in these boxes. And then we had to put them out of the boxes back into the bookcase. And I'm looking at these books and I go, man, these are incredible books. It was it was all the political philosophy stuff that I love. And it was all this very esoteric alternative health knowledge that I love. And so I was just admiring him, and there was one book in particular that very few people know about. It's called Hanta Yo. It's this amazing story of the Lakota Sioux that's just phenomenal. And LB had a copy of this book. And I said, LB, what are you going to do with your books? He says, well, are you interested? And I said, yeah, this book right here, I've been looking for it because I'd lost it. I'd given it to somebody who wasn't returned. And I said, can I have it? He goes, not now. But it was implied that I would get it afterwards, obviously, so that was implied. So anyway, after he passed, we were there the day before, me and my wife, and that was very moving. And we went there the day of it, just to be in his presence and meditate in the room. And somebody, I asked, well, what's he doing with his books? And I think it was Jennifer or someone. And it just came to me instantly. I said, we should have a library of his books, and we could do it at the Phoenix Rising Hall, and people could come to read his books. So everybody thought that was a great idea. So the books were, we have the bookcase, it's here, and his other bookcase, and the majority of his books, some were taken, but these are very amazing books. And we're going to be creating a reading room in one of the lounge areas on the second floor in the back. It'll also be jointly used as a healing room, because we're going to have healing rooms and things back there too. So you can come and read LB's books.
This concludes our formal gathering, and there's refreshments in the back, and please feel free to gather and share your stories. Thank you so much for coming.